Welcome to PM in the PM. This is the regular podcast where I take a look at recent events and see how it links back to the ACCA performance management syllabus areas. Using real-world application is one way to really help understand the topic areas, embed that knowledge so that when you're answering questions, you'll recall things more easily, but also you'll be able to add more value, and that's what the examiner's looking for, particularly in section C, how you can add value. So today we're looking at Easter eggs and variances. We're going to talk a little bit about some brought forward knowledge from the MA syllabus area and also some of the variances in the performance management syllabus area. Now, one of the things that's changed in recent years is the cost of cocoa. Cocoa is a commodity that is used in chocolate production. In 2022, it was around about $2,000 per tonne. Now it's around about $11,000 per tonne. It did peak almost hitting $13,000. So it's increased 4 or 5 times in just 3 years. The majority of cocoa is grown in West Africa. Around about 70% is grown in the Ivory Coast and in Ghana. And because of various factors like climate and weather change and supply chain issues, that's driven these prices up, and up. If you were an Easter egg manufacturer, what could you do with this commodity that's essential to your product that's 4 or 5 times more expensive than it was 3 years ago? Well, one thing you could do is just absorb that price increase. One of the variances we look at in management accounting is a total material variance, and that can be split up into the material price variance and the material usage variance. You can picture it a bit like a family tree where the total materials variance is above and the material price and the material usage variance feed up into that. Well, if as an Easter egg manufacturer you still use the same amount of materials but the price has gone up, you've got an adverse material price variance, which therefore leads to an adverse total materials variance. And the impact on the organisation is that's going to decrease your profits. One action you can take, and again this is captured within the management accounting syllabus, is you can put your prices up. In a similar way to this family tree we have with the materials variance, we also have the same with sales variances, where total sales variances sits at the top, and underneath that the branches lead down to a sales price variance and a sales volume variance. Well, as a manufacturer you could increase your prices, so what you're doing is you're offsetting that adverse material price variance with a favourable sales price variance. And that would be great, except that what you probably could do is decrease your sales volume. So you end up with an adverse sales volume variance. So it's a good example of how these variances interrelate. It's unlikely you'll be able to increase your price without decreasing your volumes. So you might be able to offset some of that adverse materials price variance, but whether you could offset it all or not is questionable. And particularly given we've seen a 4 or 5 times increase in the cost of this raw commodity, it's hard to see that the market would just absorb that without decreasing sales volumes. But now we can jump to PM. If we've studied more than MA and we're studying PM and we understand performance management, what else can we do? Well, one thing we can do, and the market has done this, it's colloquially called shrinkflation, is Easter eggs are generally a bit smaller than they used to be. Instead of now making an Easter egg perhaps at 250 grams, it's dropped to 200 grams. So the amount of product has reduced, and the aim is if you can keep prices the same, then you've used less materials. So what variance is that? That's trying to create a favourable planning variance. We've got these split of planning and operational variances, and when we change the standard, when we decide instead of making a 250 gram Easter egg, we're going to make a 200 gram Easter egg, that is a planning variance. It leads to a favourable planning variance because we've reduced the amount. If we kept the price the same, then that's favourable. But of course it's not that simple, because if we go back to our sales variances, if we're decreasing the amount that people get, well, maybe that also then decreases our volume. So we could end up with an adverse sales volume variance because people are getting less. They'll feel, I'm getting less for my money, therefore I won't buy. But there's another tool we can use within PM. And if we go back to our materials variance, on our family tree linkage, we've got total materials variance at the top, and material price and material usage variance sit under that and feed up into that. But we can also subdivide the material usage variance into a mix variance and a yield variance. Mix and yield variances are one of the topic areas in performance management. And if we look at the mix, we could change our recipe. That's another change we could make, and that would lead to a mix variance. For example, at the moment, cocoa is around about $11,000 a tonne. Sugar has also increased in price over the last few years from about $460 to $770 per tonne. But let's change our recipe. Let's say we originally were putting a tonne of cocoa in, but now we're going to put in 100 kilograms less. So that's going to save us around about $1,100. But if we want the same output, maybe we have to increase the amount of sugar by 100 kilograms. That's going to cost an extra $70 or $80. What we've done is decrease our cost of that mix by $1,000. And if we assume we get the same yield, then we've created a favourable mix variance. And if we jump up in our family tree, that therefore creates a favourable material usage variance. We've already got an adverse material price variance, so we're trying to offset that adverse price variance against a favourable usage variance. And the aim could be to try and get a neutral materials variance, i.e. no variance in total materials. What we don't know is if we did reduce the cocoa and increase the sugar, maybe it would affect yield. Maybe we'd get a higher yield, maybe we'd get a lower yield. If we got a lower yield, then some of that favourable mix variance is offset by that adverse yield variance. So the benefit isn't quite as good. However, if we end up with a higher yield, then we've improved the material usage variance and offsetting that adverse price variance by even more. And it would be good if we could stop there, but we can't, because what we probably would see is if we reduce the amount of cocoa and increase the amount of sugar, we've changed the recipe, we've changed the fundamental product that people are buying. And what's that done to quality? Maybe because we've taken some of the cocoa out, put more sugar in, maybe we need some more flavour in. Maybe it doesn't taste as nice as before. Some chocolate has a bit of a synthetic taste to it, so maybe we have tipped the balance from something that tastes good to something that tastes synthetic. So what's that going to do? If we affect quality adversely, let's go back to our sales volume. We're probably going to have an adverse sales volume variance as a result of the quality. There's a lot going on in these variances, and although we calculate each variance in isolation, when we're talking about the narrative and thinking about the bigger picture, we have to take into account that they all interrelate. And I hope here we've got a good example of how sales variances interact with materials variances, and they interact with planning and operational variances. It's all tied together. When you're asked a narrative question, particularly in mix and yield variances, never forget that quality. If we change the mix, have we impacted quality in a way that means that we've affected our sales volume? But thanks for tuning in to PM in the PM. I hope you found this episode informative. Variances are a challenging area in the PM syllabus. A lot of students struggle with them, but hopefully this is another example of where real-world application, thinking something through in the context of the PM syllabus, helps establish a memory in your brain that you can recall during the exam and increase the quality and value add in the answers you give. Until next time, this is Richard Guyver signing off.